Good evening. Hello to everybody. Greetings from our Journal Foundation. A very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar that talks about IB MYP ePortfolios for theatre. I'm Ruchira Banka, who would like to take this opportunity to introduce our Journal Foundation, the organization that organized this event for us, with a vision to create and spread awareness about the importance of process over product, a process of development of art, and an endeavor to create specialized pieces that integrate diverse disciplines. Our Journal Foundation aims to bring together resources and platforms for students and teachers to invoke creative thinking that leads to creation of a masterpiece. Our Journal Foundation is a not-for-profit independent organization that supports process, practice, and exploration of art across the globe. It believes that art and culture are essential foundations to the community and a necessity for a more equitable and just world. As facilitators, catalysts, and provocators in the field, our Journal Foundation supports critical investigations, explorations, and experiments that push boundaries of knowledge and practice and challenge dominant narratives. I thank our Journal Foundation for bringing us together on this day to discuss the MYP ePortfolios. Over to you, Annie.
Thank you, Ruchira. Hello, everyone, and welcome today for this lovely webinar. Let me quickly introduce myself. I am Annie. I'm currently a practicing theatre facilitator at Legacy School, Bangalore, which is an IGCSE curriculum school. I'm also a freelance drama for learning specialist at Theatre Professionals Private Limited. I also work as a content designer and facilitator at Akara, the applied theatre company. I'm currently pursuing my Cambridge certification in teaching and learning, and I'm also a certified social emotional learning educator from Journey Matters. Now, let me introduce the speaker for today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my dearest friend, colleague, and mentor, Ms. Srividya Srinivas, who's going to be talking to us today about MYP ePortfolio. Srividya has been a drama educator for the past 11 years, with middle and high school students in various international schools in Bangalore, including Indus International School, Greenwood High, and Oak Ridge International School in the IGCSE, MYP, and DP spaces. She has taught MYP theatre for 5 years. She's trained and mentored MYP theatre facilitators. She was part of a team that built the MYP curriculum at Oak Ridge International School. She was also part of the MYP authorization process at Oak Ridge, where she has trained and mentored several educators to use drama as a pedagogical tool in their classrooms. She is also a faculty at Applied Theatre India Foundation for their PG Diploma Applied Theatre course. She also works as a visiting faculty for the MA Applied Theatre course at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, London. Srividya has done her MA in Applied Theatre from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, where she has worked inclusively with various communities in India and in London. And she currently runs Akara, the applied theatre company, where they use SEL tools along with arts and drama-based pedagogy with children as well as young adults. And last but not the least, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Ruchira Banka, who is a lifelong learner and an esteemed educator in her field. She's been in the field of education for the past 17 years as a teacher, content developer, and an administrator. She is a mathematics facilitator who has led the CBSE, Cambridge, and IB MYP curriculum during her tenure as an educator. Her latest experience with MYP as a program coordinator in Oak Ridge International School, Bangalore, gives her the exposure into the journey of ePortfolios. Her interest and experience in this context led her to write her own book, Visual Arts Companion for IB MYP. To spread the idea of concept and skill-based learning, she has taken up as a consultant with educational organizations. She leads the consulting team in the Art Journal Foundation. She trains and mentors teachers with a notion to fulfill her goals of spreading skill-based education. For her contribution to the education community, she has recently won an award by the Indian School Awards. Congratulations, Ms. Ruchira. Coming to today's webinar, the objectives of today's webinar is to discuss the MYP ePortfolio. everything that's related in that context, the 4 tasks, the criterions that are covered under those 4 tasks, and most importantly, the process of gathering evidence towards completing these 4 tasks. So to start off, I'd like to invite Ms. Ruchira to give us her perspective as an MYP coordinator on the partially completed unit planner and its related context. Over to you, Ms. Ruchira.
Thank you so much, Annie, for this warm introduction. And I would really like to thank Srividya to be a part of this webinar and be enlightening us over this important topic of ePortfolios, which is the season of ePortfolios, I must say. I have had the opportunity to work with Srividya and Annie both, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a journey of learning for me with Srividya, wherein we had explored every bit of ePortfolios together. So I think today we'll begin from the ground level on talking about the assessments in IB. So IB conducts assessment for students for grade 10, which are called the e-assessment. These have 2 components basically. One is the on-screen assessment, which is for subjects like language and literature, mathematics, sciences, individuals and societies, language acquisition, and interdisciplinary learning. Apart from this, IB expects students to work on e-portfolios for design, arts, and physical and health education. All these subjects together lead to gaining the MYP certificate to the MYP students at the end of grade 10. So talking about e-portfolios, these are a compilation of tasks that the students need to work on under the supervision of their teachers based on the IB MYP criteria. These are internally assessed by the teachers and then externally moderated by the IB, as in the teachers assess these in school and then send to IB for moderation. And today we are going to talk in detail about the MYP Theatre ePortfolios and discuss on strategies that have been adopted by various facilitators in collaboration. Of course, Srividya has been collaborating with facilitators from across the globe and will be sharing these best practices which have helped learners to achieve the best scores. Okay, now, when we talk about e-portfolios, the first step that comes to our mind as new educators maybe sometimes, and where do I start from? So the ignition to this portfolio system is given by the IB in the form of something called the PCUPs, partially completed unit planners. These are released by the IB on 1st of November and 1st of May for the May and November sessions respectively. These planners are basically the big umbrellas under which the teachers from across the globe get a common direction to work on, so that everybody is on the same page when we are working on certain things that need to be standardized. These include the unit title, key concept, the related concept, global context. Of course, the appropriate explanation needs to be decided by the teacher and the students when this is introduced in class. It involves the statement of inquiry given in the PCUP. The PCUP also includes the inquiry questions, which helps the facilitators to set an appropriate pace for inquiry in the classroom. The e-portfolio is in the form of 4 well-knit tasks, and these have such a seamless flow that you would not get to realize that when is the child moving from task 1 to task 2. Each of these tasks actually is assessed on the IB criteria for MYP year 5, and these are clearly mentioned in the planner, the partially completed unit planner, along with the strands which are going to be assessed. Apart from all of these, IB also provides us a set of resources in the partially completed unit planner, which give appropriate guidance to the students and teachers, and marks a formal end to the unit planner. IB provides us the structure, and it really leaves us with the space for creativity and thinking. It is just a framework that is given to us as facilitators. And this flexibility given to teachers helps them plan their learning engagements that would best suit the context of their classrooms. So ultimately, we see that this is a standardized set of expectations from all schools because there is a partially completed unit planner, along with a seed has been sown for creativity, wherein you have the ignition, you take it along the way as you wish to, along with your learners. So teachers are free to decide what learning engagements to be planned in the classroom, differentiation strategies, whatever can be planned in the classroom to develop on the approaches to learning skills, the IB learner profile, and even the subject-specific skills for sure. So IB gives us this framework, and it is imperative that the teachers and students understand the IB expectations. And hence we thought, let us get together to be able to understand these expectations from experience and I think Srividya is the best person. So I hand over to Srividya to take it from here, and we shall continue discussions.
Thank you so much for that, Ruchira. So Ruchira has actually spoken a lot about the PCUP, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But yeah, as she said, it is the e-assessment for the arts. It's a 4-part summative assessment that tracks the creative journey of the student. So, and your PCUP is always connected to the global context given for this year. So for this year, it is personal cultural expressions. So what we're going to do, if you could go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? No, there's a slide before that. Okay, I think we're missing a slide. Never mind. So with the PCUP, there are a couple of things that we need to think about. So when we receive the PCUP, we've got the key concepts, the related concepts, the global context, we've got the statement of inquiry, we've got the inquiry questions and the summative task. But then we need to kind of fit it into a unit of exploration, so to speak. So if we look at, I think we've got the unit plan for, if we could go 2 slides ahead, please. Sorry. If we could go to one more, just one more. Yeah, this is the one. So if we look at this particular unit plan, which was, I think, 2021 November PCUP, we see that the unit name is Art Connections. The global context was fairness and development, and the key concept was communication. Related concept was audience, and statement of inquiry was Art Restores Connection. So when we look at that itself, we have several ideas coming to mind as to what we can possibly explore through these things, right? So I would like to make this a little bit more interactive. So I would invite you to maybe try and figure out what this could be, what we could explore through this PCUP, just by looking at the KCRC, GC, and SOI. You can put it in the chat box.
Maybe looking, Srividya, looking at a couple of prompts here, when it says art restores connections, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking about creating connections using art as a common medium, right? Yeah. So again, creating connections could be anything from maybe personal connections. So we have Akshat here says, sharing our stories through art, like I said, personal connection. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Akshat. And going beyond personal connection, maybe using art to create connections with a community, maybe.
Therapy using art. That's interesting. Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Annie, you were completing something.
No, yes, I was just looking at prompts to maybe, start thinking of what possible topics we could think of, keeping these words in mind, so starting with personal connection with the arts, community connections, taking it to maybe local communities, national communities, and even global communities, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Zubin also says discovering yourself under the umbrella of art, which is a really interesting way to look at it, because unless we know ourselves, how do we know our place in the community as well, which is very nice. Thank you. And Vivek says we can explore evolution of human through art. Absolutely. So we can see through this that there are so many ways of looking at this one, at just looking at the unit name, the KCRC, GC, and SOI. Yeah, how can how can art play the role of communicator and its impact on the audience? Yeah, exploring human interest stories through arts. We can share our lots of.
Absolutely.
Yes. I love these ideas coming.
Yes, especially, the human interest stories. When I'm reading that, the first thought that comes to my mind is even theater of the oppressed, foreign theater. Things, theater as a form to create not just within yourself, but taking it to communities as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with all these ideas, it's so easy to get very confused as well, because you don't know what will work for you, what doesn't. So what are the kind of things that we need to think about when we are figuring out what to do with the PCUP? I think the first thing that you should be looking at is your students' prior knowledge. What have they done so far? If they've done theater right from MYP 1 right up to MYP 5, what all have they covered? What are the skills that they know? What are the explorations they've done? And then build on that. Yeah. Sometimes I have also kind of used skills or techniques that I've already done in the past and just built on that and gone deeper into it, because I've not been able to go as deep in that one unit that I've done with them. So that's one way of looking at it. The other thing that you need to think about is what are the resources that are available to you as a facilitator in the school, in the classroom, in terms of knowledge resources as well. What kind of information do you have access to? Or maybe if you want to bring a guest lecturer in, what kind of human resources do you have access to? So these are the kind of things that one must also look at when you are working with the PCUP. Then the other thing you also need to look at is the strands being assessed. And this is always mentioned in the PCUP as well. Now, the one thing when it comes to the strands and the name of the tasks as well is there is a difference between what is in the MYP Arts Guide and what is in the PCUP. We're going to focus on the PCUP and go with that, because that is what has been released by the IB immediately. Yeah, so we always focus on what's on the PCUP. Great. And the last thing, sorry, I forgot to mention, that you need to also look at is the interest of your learners. I think that is extremely important, because if your learners are not interested, and hopefully working with them over 2 years, you'll also have a better sense of what works for them and what doesn't. So it's best to always go with what your learners also want to explore, because they are going to be working on this intensively for the next couple of months. So they also have to be invested in it personally as well. So that being said, let's go to each of the tasks. So if you could go to the task 1 slide, please. No, the task 1 slide, which is slide 11. Yes, next one. Yes, thank you. So the first task is presentation. It's criteria A and D, which is knowing and understanding and responding. So it is basically a presentation of their research. So once you figured out what you're going to be exploring, for example, if we're looking at Theatre of the Oppressed as an example for this, because we are going to be working with the November 2020 or 21 plan PCUP that I shared with you. So if we're going to be working with that, and let's say we're going with Theatre of the Oppressed, now we can look for the first task. We're doing an exploration, a research into master artists or theorists or practitioners that work in the field of TO, right? So it could be anywhere starting from Boal. It could even be if you're in India and you're aware of any, theater companies that work with Theatre of the Oppressed, like we have CCDC in Bangalore who work with Theatre of the Oppressed extensively. We could look at their work as well. So you pick maybe what I tend to do is I pick a couple of practitioners and I share it with my learners, and I allow them to pick who they are interested in researching into, right? And they then go and do their research. And the presentation can either be done in the form of a video presentation, or it can be done in the form of a written document. However, what I prefer to do usually is I encourage them to do it as a written document, only because if we go to slides, if we go back to slide 7, if I can show slide 7, please. Sorry, going a little bit back and forth here, but if we could go back to slide 7, no, one slide before that. Yeah, if you go back to this slide. So here, if you can see, you will see that if you have 0 audio visual evidence, you can have 30 A4 pages. Whereas if you have only 15 minutes of audio video, you cannot write a single word in the ePortfolio. And so there has to be a bit of a balance, because ultimately your task 3, which is the outcome, which is a product, and of course, because we're performing arts subjects, it means that we will have a video. We will have to ensure that balance is created. So which is why I usually tend to encourage my learners to do a written document. But again, it also depends on the comfort level of your learners. So if your learners are not comfortable with writing, or have they're not comfortable with writing, then you might have to create some sort of balance where you have audio, video, and written work. So that's something that you've got to work with your learners for, but you need to keep in mind this this balancing act that you have to do between written work and audiovisual evidence. If you could go back to slide 11, please. Akshat, I'll take questions at the end of each task. So I'll finish this task and then I'll definitely take your question. Yeah.
You can also put your questions in the chat box.
Yeah, you can also put your questions in the chat box.
Thank you.
Yeah. So basically, that's what task 1 is. And it's a first step of your artistic journey as well, right? Before you create a performance, before you create a work of art, you usually do research on it, find out more about it. Yeah, find out more about the artist style that you're looking at as well, right? Akshat, you had a question. Would you like to ask now? Can you have 2? Okay, there's one question here. Can you have 2 visuals, for example, one for rehearsal to show skills and one for performance, and counted as one video? Okay, so this is a question, Eric, that I'm going to answer once I talk about task 3, because it is connected to that. Is it possible to unmute Akshat? And Bandana, would you, are you able to unmute yourself and ask?
You guys can also put the questions in the chat box.
Yeah, you can put the questions in the chat box as well.
Hi, Shri Vidya. This is Bandana this side. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Bandana.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question. You started off because I did this unit. So what I do with my kids is, because I have MYP 4 and then I take them to 5. So in MYP 4, we generally take up a PCUP and we do it for the entire term.
Yes.
So at least by the time the PCUP is released in the month of November, they are done with 3 attempts.
Yeah. So
so my question here is, you said, for example, this unit says art builds connections.
Yeah.
In this unit, you said, you started off with the theater form. This is theater for press. Is it compulsory to start off with a theater form? Because initially, when I did it for the first year, like 3-4 years back, I started off with the theater form. Okay, but the problem was getting the right kind of resources for that theater form. So now, after that, I changed my pedagogy in that manner. I said, look at the statement of inquiry and look at the productions that connects to the statement of inquiry, and from that build up the art, the theater form. For example, if it is a performance, what are there physical theater performances like that? So is both the ways correct, or is it I'm going the wrong way?
No, so Bandana, again, as I said, it's really up to your, your access to resources. So you can look at it both ways, right? For me, I mean, I immediately went to Theatre of the Oppressed here because I know I have resources for that. But it, as I said, it depends on the resources that you have and also your learners' prior knowledge as well.
Yeah.
So both ways work. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's absolutely fine. But of course, if you're looking at a performance as such, then you're looking at only one practitioner, then I'm assuming, or are you looking at how different practitioners have looked at, have worked with that performance in the past?
So no, basically, that's what the confusion is here. My question here is, for example, let's say if I talk about the current unit, which says how nature, inspires art. For that matter, if I look at Ratan Thiam's one of the play, Chakravyuh, it is majorly a physical theater performance, and then they explore physical theater.
Yeah.
So that's the connection. So looking at Ratan Thiam's work, and then there's another artwork that they will be exploring. So two artworks that they can analyze.
So then in which case, yeah, you can choose two different artworks by two different practitioners maybe, and then get them to do a comparative study of that.
Yes. So that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thanks for clarifying that. And also, Bandana, what you said about getting them to use PCUPs right from M4, yes, absolutely. So what I have done is, in fact, right from M1, while I don't use PCUP, I do convert the essay, the summative assessment of each term into a ePortfolio unit.
Yeah, we are doing the same in our school.
Yeah, because what that does is it also gets learners to slowly learn how to create a ePortfolio, because suddenly in M4, if you introduce them to ePortfolio, it can get very overwhelming. Right.
So, sorry, just one more question just related to that only. Yeah.
Sure, Vandana.
So so the confusion here is this is 3 years back. So the internal assessment report that I got from IB is we are supposed to send a 30-page, let's say, document.
Yes.
So my kids had 24 pages and the sufficient number of video recording. Okay. But in the internal assessment, the comment that I got from the examiner was for criteria B, the word limit has been exceeded. But so I did not understand, and I got my work assessed by 2-3 examiners also. They said this is wrong. This doesn't make sense, because you're not supposed to be judging task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4 separately. It's a complete ePortfolio together. So can you just guide me regarding that?
So Bandana, for that, I'm going to have to direct it to Ruchira, who as a former MYP coordinator can help out a bit.
Yeah, actually, frankly speaking, Bandana and Shri, both the ways, there is no set prescribed pattern. So the table that was shown to you in the previous few slides, I think that is the only guidance that we get from the IB.
So I followed that table, but it didn't work. Nobody didn't work. As per if I look at the comments of the examiner.
Yeah, so I think that is a question. Then we send in papers for inquiry upon results, EURs, because otherwise, that has worked for me in the past few sessions, whatever sessions I've taken up for various art forms, not only theater, it has worked very well. So in a particular case where it has not worked well, I think inquiry upon results should be a best way to reach out to IB. And that should be done, because, it doesn't seem to be appropriate where we see that a particular guidance has been given, but not being followed while the paper is being moderated.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I tend to do, Bandana, is what I've always told my learners is to split the 30 pages into 4. So you're dividing it by 4, and then so that you're also giving equal kind of weightage to all of them, and then you can play around with it within that kind of. That's what I usually do.
And another best practice you can add in here is whenever you're putting in your slides on the PPT, you can address, you can mention as a student what criteria is being addressed on that particular slide, along with the strand. That really helps the examiner to understand that you've addressed all the required criteria, and there is a clarity that there's nothing beyond that is required. And if your understanding of the criteria is correct, you would be marked there accordingly.
Yeah. Zubin, you had a question?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
This is me. Actually, I have also posted the question. It's regarding the task 1. They have already mentioned one part of it. So my question is, what is exactly expected to write under the perceptive interpretation of their research? That belongs to A2 and A1 and A2.
So with when they say perceptive interpretation of research, it is not just finding information, but finding your connect to that information as well, right? So you're also interpreting what, the information that you're getting. Am I making sense here?
Using different perspectives, basically.
Yeah,
right?
basically.
A critical research, a critical view at the research, rather.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing out the words, Annie. Right? It's not just saying this is the information, this is fact 1, fact 2, fact 3, but you're also interpreting it, You're also making sense of it. You're also connecting the dots. And that is what is expected of students for that particular task.
Yeah, just to add to this, the two words itself give you the meaning, the perceptive and interpretation. You look at some multiple perspectives, and from that you interpret your own understanding as an artist. What do you see and what can you find and what can you develop further?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Akshat, your question, sorry.
No, I was just reminding you there's another question by Akshat.
I was just responding to that. So Akshat, your question is, task 1 is presentation. Can it be written as well? That's what I said earlier. Yes, of course, it can be written. It can also be an audio visual thing. I tend to encourage written work because then you can put in a lot more compared to audio visual, only because of that sliding scale of a maximum of 15 minutes and 0 words and 0 pages, which makes it really tricky. Because I can imagine an entire task 1 to be a 15-minute long presentation also, which leaves us with no space for anything else. I think there's one more question by Sheila. In task 1, can students choose one artist and in analysis compare 2 plays? Of course, you can do that so long as it makes sense within the framework of the PCUP. So you can definitely choose one artist and look at both their, look at 2 of their artwork as well, which is also something that I have done, right? So that there's also compare and contrast that's happening there. Okay, so we can then move on to task 2. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So task 2, development, which is criteria B and C. Now, this is an interesting one because it is a collection of process journal extracts. And I find this really fun because every year without fail, your students would have forgotten to write their process journals. And that is a struggle year on year, however firm you are with them. And so what I have always done is right from MYP 1, even if it is in the most simplest format, get them into that practice of writing in their process journals. So with MYP 1, 2, what I tend to do is give them about 15 minutes at the end of the session, give them a focused question that they have to answer. And sometimes what may even help is just giving them a way to respond, like write 10 words that encapsulates your learning from today's class. Something as simple as that. Or find a partner, talk to your partner about about your experience in today's class. Spend a few minutes on your own, write what you discussed. But something as simple as that paves way for when they're in MYP 4 and 5 to learn and be more reflective. Because what happens is suddenly in MYP 4 and 5, they get sick and tired of hearing the word reflection. The minute I say riff, they're like, no, 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 no. They know what is coming. And it becomes a very tedious task. I mean, as adults, we know how painful it can be if we're not in that practice of reflecting and we have to reflect. As students, even more painful. So it's best to always kind of get them started on this process earlier, because for this particular task, you are selecting journal extracts and journal extracts that show the students' artistic intention. So what is this artistic intention? This artistic intention is basically, now you've done the research and now you're figuring out what you want to do. So for example, let's say I've looked at CCDC's work, and they work in the space of health, and they work with communities, and they work with several people. And let's say I want to look at their work in health, in the healthcare system. So I might say, great, okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to go into, I would like to work with a hospital, my neighborhood hospital, and I'd like to work with the nurses and the doctors of this particular department. Yeah, let's say we're working with the neurological department. I don't know, I'm really improvising as I go along here. But let's say I want to work with the neurological department, with the nurses and the doctors in that department, because there's a lot of conflict happening within that space, right? And so I want to create a workshop, a 5-part workshop, where I'll be going in once a week for 5 weeks. And I'll be working towards a forum theater piece with them that explores the conflict that they're experiencing, right? And I will then I will look at what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do, why I want to do this. And this is my artistic intention. What is my intention as an artist here when I go to those people and work with them? What am I exploring? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And the key is to keep asking the question, why? Right?
I think that question also, starts them thinking about the skill of reflection, because
Yes.
I feel that's the, that's what initiates the whole process of reflection. And of course, reflection is a skill. It's not just for the process journal or for a submission purpose. It becomes a lifelong skill as well,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And just thinking of the task that you were just talking about, Sri, closer to home, we could even, going again by Theatre of the Oppressed, we could even ask them to, start thinking about the impact of Theatre of the Oppressed or a forum theatre piece that can come about in their own circles, like maybe a couple of sessions for students passing out from PYP into MYP, to talk about, acceptance and peer pressure and, self-acceptance, and just getting themselves adjusted into the middle school, because I know that, the transition from PYP into MYP is so hard. And by the time these kids have come to M4, they know the struggle.
Yeah.
Right. And it'll be so much more easier for them to relate to that experience. So for them to create maybe a workshop or even a 2-part workshop for their juniors.
Yeah.
Right, leading into maybe a forum theater piece where they ask the audience to come up and find solutions for maybe instances of bullying, or just being accepted into their groups.
Yeah.
I think that will create a lot more, like an impact which they can relate to.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Thanks for that example, Annie, because I think, when you bring it close to home, also they're more invested in it, and it's a great place to start. So, I mean, you can look at it both internally and also externally within the larger community as well.
Shri, if may I add a point here?
Yeah,
so when
sure.
we're talking of process journals, and a lovely example that Annie gave, that cases of bullying and how do they become set up examples for their juniors at times, and all of that. During these days of pandemic, everybody has been at home, and kids are not able to gain certain experiences like this. If they do not have experiences, they would say, I do not have things to put in my process portfolio or process journal, sorry. So at this point, what could be done is also they can look at the series that they keep watching. Netflix is the famous thing with them, the popular thing with them. So we can talk about series from which they would actually pick up certain extracts that can be put in the journal, because that can become their inspiration at any point of time.
Absolutely.
And all these topics, like if we pick up bullying, if we talk of serving the community, as in the exemplar that you were talking about, connecting dots between the community. So we could pick up certain instances of series where this is being talked about, and that can become their inspiration prior to leading into actually what the theater portfolio would require.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes what I even do is I have bullied my students into keeping their journals right from MYP 1 right up to MYP 5, because you never know when inspiration hits.
Absolutely.
As simple as that. And there are times when my students have gone to their journals right from MYP 3 saying, hey, we did this, and I think I want to use this in my ePortfolio unit as an inspiration or as a skill that I want to further develop. And they do that. And that's absolutely fine, which is why the journal is something that they have to, it's like your treasure trove when it comes to the ePortfolio, because your task 2 is only a selection of process journal extracts. And what you have to do is you also have to demonstrate a range of creative thinking behaviors right? So how are you being creative with your artistic intention? How are you thinking outside the box? What are you doing that is unique and that caters so well to the community that you want to work with? Like Annie said, when you're looking at learners going from PYP 5 to MYP 1, there are so many issues that come about in that transition that we can look at. And these are experiences that your MYP 5 kids have experienced not so long ago. So it becomes relatable for them as well, right? And the other thing that you have to do is you have to show a minimum of 3 examples of skills and techniques that they have developed through this particular unit. Now, these skills can, the example of these skills are through evidences. And how do you show these evidences? It can be in the form of sketches, it can be in the form of videos. So during the process, you take videos or audios, or you show drafts of scripts, their reflections, storyboards, and I think the list is pretty endless here. At this point, I would also, since Annie does work in the space of drama in schools, I would invite Annie also to maybe give some examples of some of the evidences that she has taken from her learners. From
Absolutely, Sri. So one of my favorite forms of collection of evidence is Jamboards. One, because it allows for quick reflection as well. So, I start off using that as a reflection tool. End of session, I just share a Jamboard and ask them to put post-it notes with maybe just words, phrases, put it together that way. But of course, for my older learners, going by the way the online learning has been going on the last 2 years, we all know that the students are much more technically capable than we are. So for the older learners, they love doing videos of their own. Like, for example, a verbatim theater unit that I just completed, where I invited them to take a video and create a short film out of it. They created a 5-minute film, and they were more than happy to do the editing and put in the effects and bring it to life, because that's an interest. It's a newly found skill for them, right? And in the light of the present circumstances, the present situation, we can totally develop that skill, because it is a skill finally. Editing and recording and bringing it together as a visual medium is a skill. So that is one. Having them do individual video presentations, group video presentations, Jamboards, Google Docs. So when I give group tasks, collaborative tasks, I always ask one of them to create a Google Doc and share it with me. And I asked them to put in all their, brainstorming points, bullet points, as in the form of bullet points, onto that Google Doc, so that we can go back to it towards the end of the unit, right? And another famous one, and a really interactive one, is the Padlet, of course. It's colorful, it's simple. You can even create timelines in Padlets. So you can use it like throughout, the unit, and having them keep filling up the timelines as and when their learning is being, you're scaffolding their learning. So you keep asking them to put in those timelines, or you can use it maybe at the end of the unit and give them a timeline Padlet and ask them to fill it up and see how their thought process went towards the creation of a certain piece, right? So yeah, that's about it. I hope that helps.
Thanks for that, Annie. That was very helpful. So the one thing that I do, because task 2 is only a selection of process journal extracts, and process journal extracts on their own are meaningless without the student actually writing at least a line or two about what the extracts are about. So I ask them, when they put in an extract underneath, just give a small description of what it's about, so it makes sense for the person reading it. Because later on, when I am assessing it as a facilitator, and if I'm looking at it, it needs to make sense to me as well. And that's the first thing that I have to, while I do know them, when I'm assessing them, I'm looking at it as someone I don't know. Because that's how the examiner is going to moderate it as well. They don't know these students. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their capabilities are, their potentials are. We do, but it's important that we keep that away and ensure that they don't keep vital information in their heads, but actually put it down on paper, because that is key. So always I get them to write a small line, about what this extract is and what it is telling us. So again, this can be a combination of audiovisual and written, because as I said, some of the evidences come in the form of videos and audios as well. But of course, it's important when you're doing video and audio evidences to be able to identify the student assessed in those extracts. Because at the end of the day, the examiner also needs to know who the student is. Especially when you're doing audio, it becomes a little tricky because you need to be able to identify that voice of the student. So that's a tricky space to go to, but as a facilitator, you might need to sit with your students and figure out how you're going to ensure that that is clear, right? If we can move on, please. And at this point, if we have any questions for task 2, very quickly we go through it. Yeah, yes, Zubin.
Yeah, hi. So it's Zubain again.
Yeah.
Considering the task 2, some of my students, when they were writing the artistic intentions, so initially what they did was brainstorming. So these were all my 5-6 ideas that I came up with, and they wrote about those ideas, and then after giving a thought for a couple of days, they thought, okay, I'm selecting this one particular idea out of it. Okay. So I'm just clarifying that, just to make it clear for myself that the process is appropriate and the process we are in the right direction.
Absolutely. And they need to document this process. And this documentation has to go into their task 2.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah, because it's not just, this is my artistic intention, but this is how I went from task 1, all that research, and this is how I developed my artistic intention. And here you go, this is my artistic intention. That is your task 2. And then to top it off, say, these are the skills that I have developed through this unit. Does that make sense?
Yes. And one more thing. So it's again going in connection with task 3 also. So most of the students are coming up with the, not being there at home alone, no collaboration with other peers. So most of the students are coming up with the monologues for the outcomes.
Okay.
So I'm also looking for, are there any more alternatives that they can also perform?
There are. Definitely, there are, because they can still work collaboratively, even in this online space. I mean, one way of doing it is that, they create a piece together, they each video it in their house and stitch it together. Or another way of doing it is that they're actually creating a Zoom performance. Because now, thanks to the pandemic, there are so many more ways of creating performances, and kids today are super creative, as Annie earlier mentioned, that she actually got them to create a verbatim piece sitting from home. Right? And collaborative work is something that they crave at this point, because they're all sitting at home, not able to go into school, working with their peers and all of that. So actually, I would encourage you to get them to do collaborative pieces.
So you mean to say the cuttings and editing, everything is allowed now?
It has to be allowed. How else to do it in this online space?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And it's now become a process. It's now become a process of performance making. So we have to kind of work with that as well. It's also about being, going with the times as well, no?
Yes, absolutely. That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
No worries. Vandana, you had a question?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
so
great.
I was coming to artistic intention only. Yeah.
Okay. I hope I've answered your question, though.
Yes.
Super. So Sheila, because we're working in the online space now, we have to. But Ruchira, I'd also like to ask you, as an MYP coordinator, whether IB has any specific note on that.
No, I think it's more about being able to explain that even during the times of pandemic, I have been able to overcome situations, and I've been able to develop these particular skills during this process. So as much as students talk about the process, and see, ultimately IB is not looking at the final product. trust me, even if a final piece that they create is a disaster, IB is good with it.
Yeah.
However, whatever is the learning during the process is what needs to be seen. So if we are looking at kids at this stage creating monologues or being just creating their own pieces and not collaborating, not too great an idea. You know, that comes from to me as just as experience. IB doesn't write that as well, you know. But out of my experience, I say IB would love to see that during these times of pandemic, how did you overcome a situation and how were you able to collaborate even though?
Yeah.
Then how creatively you've, you know, stitched these pieces together. So no rules, but showcase every possible way that you have developed on skills, your learner profile. Do mention about that, as in when, you know, the reflection slide, the task 4 would come. All of that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there, Ruchira. I mean, it's important that you also encourage your learners to become risk takers in the process. And one of that is creating online performances.
Absolutely.
Because you never know how it's going to turn out, and justify it.
Just to add to that, the M22 specification that have come in, they also talk about Zoom calls, Google Teams, Hangouts, whatever medium you can use to collaborate and create these performances in the pandemic time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay, for time, I'm going to move on to task 3 now. Thank you. Okay, so task 3 is your outcome. It's criterion B. It's your performance. And here you're basically going to be choosing extracts from your performance that showcase the skills and techniques that you developed and also showed in task 2. So in task 2, you showed a minimum of 3 skills and techniques that you've learned and developed. Here, you're going to actually show that through your performance extracts. So here, what I usually do is I sit with my learners. Once we've recorded everything, I sit with my learners and I ask them to go back to the skills and techniques that they have spoken about in the previous task. And I ask them to choose the extracts from their video. And what I do is at the beginning of the video, I create another video where I ask them to first introduce themselves. So usually it's your candidate number and also one piece of costume or prop that identifies you, right? So for example, if learner A is the only one wearing a red hat throughout the performance, they will say my candidate number is XYZ and I am the person in a red hat. And that's how they identify themselves. Then what I do is before each selection of extract, I ask them to say a little bit of the skill or technique that they're showing in this particular extract. So it could be in this extract, I am showcasing XYZ skill that I have developed through this unit. Right? So that it's also very clear to the examiner who's watching what it is that they're watching. Otherwise, it just becomes a couple of very random extracts put together. This gives some focus and context for the examiner as well, because at the end of the day, the examiner does not know the student that they are assessing. So it's important to be as clear as possible without leaving anything to chance, right? So that is basically your third task. And it's very, very straightforward. So are there any questions for task 3 very quickly?
Meanwhile, somebody comes with a question. I have a point to add here, Shri.
Yes.
See, this is a very good point that you've brought in, that the examiner should be able to identify the learner who we are addressing in that particular thing. You know, the whole idea being, I'm sure all of you are aware, but still just want to bring to the plate here that not all the portfolios are sent to IB. Only a set of portfolios, selected portfolios, the IB gives you the names of particular students whose portfolios need to be sent out for moderation. So if there are errors, if there are problems with those particular, say 5 students whose portfolios you're sending, it is going to affect the scores of all the other students. So it's very important for us as educators, as facilitators here, that we are able to give a clarity for those portfolios which we are uploading. So it's always a good idea that before you upload the final set, go through it once more so that there is no scope of error left there.
Absolutely. And Vivek has asked whether performance or outcome should the SOI explicitly be justified, or can it also work if it is implicitly applied? Sorry. So it works either way so long as a student is able to justify it in their written task. In task 2, they need to be able to justify it. And even in task 3, in task 4, which we will come to next, which is a reflection task, the student must be able to justify how their work is connected to the SOI. So if they're able...
Just a quick question here. So when you said that every candidate has to introduce themselves and talk about the progression of skills, so is it just progression of skills, or do they have to make a reference to the SOI and talk about how these skills are related to the SOI and therefore it is justified? Is that the kind of justification, or is it only progression of skills?
It is progression of skills, Annie, because skill can be used in any way or form, right? Now, you are talking about how in task 2, you're looking at how your artistic intention is connected to the SOI, yes. But skills and techniques don't have to be connected to the SOI. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay. Yeah, so I hope I've answered your question there, Vivek. It's in the justification of it in task 2 and task 4. Yeah. There's a question for you, Ruchira. Is there a special portal that the coordinator uploads this work?
Yeah, actually there is a portal called the IBIS where the coordinator would upload the work. So there are spaces for task-wise uploading the work. All the specifications are given in the arts guide itself. And accordingly, your coordinator would let you know that what is the format of the task that you should submit those on.
So Solomon has asked a question. I thought it is the final product that is submitted. Can you expand on that a bit? Because what do you mean by that question?
I'm assuming there he is.
Yeah. Hi, Solomon.
What I mean is that normally it's a final product, like the process, the student creative work and all those stages.
Solomon, I'm unable to understand. I'm unable to hear what you're saying clearly.
Can you hear me?
No, there's a lot of... it's very, can you type your... yeah, thank you. Okay, in the meanwhile, let's go to task 4. Okay, so task 4 is your commentary, which is assessed on criterion D, which is responding. So this is basically your reflection. Yeah, this is where you are looking at your students' ability to construct meaning and transfer learning into their artwork. So how has your student gone from the research and presentation process of their, that part of the process to creating their artistic intention and then creating their final performance? How have they created meaning out of the research that they have done? So you're basically kind of connecting task 1 to task 3 right now. You're bringing that all together and reflecting on it. Yeah, and also you're also connecting your outcome to the statement of inquiry, right? So again, like what Annie asked earlier, and also I think what was it Vivek? Asked earlier in terms of can it be implicit, or can the connection to SOI be implicit or explicit? This is where they have to reflect on that. And this is a purely reflective task where they have to critically analyze and evaluate their own work, right? That is the purpose of this particular task. We've got some questions.
Yes, we have some questions.
Lots of questions.
From Naksha. So she asks, once after the final outcome in task 3, the students are going to write about KC, RC and global context?
Yeah, so that will be in the task 4, in their reflection.
In the commentary. Okay.
In the commentary, where they're reflecting on how their performance, their outcome is connected to this SOI, the KC, RC, and GC. While it's not explicitly mentioned that they have to connected to the KCRCGC, it does add on a layer of
and it close loops the whole artistic process as well.
Exactly,
right?
Absolutely. That's why I usually encourage my learners to reflect on that as well.
Nala wants to know which year of the arts guidance has been used.
So Nala, the new one is coming in May 2022. So as of now, we are working with the one that was published in 2017. Am I right, Ruchira?
The 2014-15 guide is being used right now.
Yeah.
And the year 5 criteria, because the question wasn't too clear. So in case you're talking about the criteria, it's the year 5 criteria that you have to look at. And the guide is the one that's available on the PRC right now.
Yeah. And Naksha, it is with the SOI, but extra added layer of KCRCGC as well. Yeah. Zubin, could you please throw some light on the realized artwork? That is your performance. The realized artwork is the final performance that your student has created. Yeah, that's what they mean by the realized artwork. Solomon says, I normally let them record their created performance and upload that. That's the final performance. So Solomon, because of that sliding scale of 30 pages versus 15 minutes, you need to, it's ideal for you to choose extracts at work to show the development of skills and techniques rather than showing the entire performance. Now, of course, if your entire performance is super short and you can accommodate it, that's absolutely fine. But somewhere in the video, I think it's important that your students also mention that these are the skills that I have developed at this point, etc. So it becomes clear. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Solomon. Yes, Akshat.
So for skills and techniques, can our design skills be one of those skills and techniques to...
What do you mean by design skills? Because it can go right from performance design, no?
Yeah. So let's say they do a set design and a costume design for their piece and show the evidence of that as one of the skills that has been acquired or developed.
Yeah, that absolutely works. So long as it is connected to
the SOI
the PCUP and the SOI, it's absolutely fine. Okay. So long as the costume that they've designed or the set they've designed actually has a connection. Bandana, you have your hands up and I'm assuming you have a perspective on this.
So 1 second. So the current unit is art inspired by nature. And so the couple of companies the students are researching are companies which do eco theater and work with used materials. So there's a huge possibility in this unit to bring those skills.
Absolutely. And that connects directly with the SOI as well. So definitely you can look at that.
And I think that also has to be, amplified with the commentary where they make the connection.
Yeah.
Right, with what they have done with the costumes or the set design or the prop design to the SOI, where they are able to justify that.
Yes,
I think that would make more sense.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Thanks, Akshat. Bandana, you had something to say here?
Yeah, just to this question, because last year one of my friends, she's teaching in Mumbai. So what happened was she sent a script as the final work, and the IB said this is. So there was a question raised regarding realized artwork. So again. So it's very dicey. So is it compulsory that the student has to perform? Because, for example, when Akshat said that they want to do costume designing and set designing, will a costume be considered as a realized artwork?
I don't see why not, so long as you have justified it in your artistic intention and also in your task for commentary. I don't see why not. But Ruchira, as MYP coordinator, would you like to throw some light?
I think I have come across it for the first time myself, a question like this. But see, what my understanding would say that if you're talking about one particular aspect of designing the costume and all, do you think you will be able to address all the criteria? Do you think you will be able to address all the subject specific skills and all the IB ATLs and the learner profile? If you are able to justify that, you've made a meaningful connection between the outcome and the statement of inquiry, addressing everything in the partially completed unit planner along with the criteria, then it's justifiable.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, when they say 3 skills and they are putting up a performance together, that can be one of the skills. They are still performing.
Yeah.
They still talk
Yes.
about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying designing as a standalone thingy. They will be producing a performance, and these are important aspects and skills to gain. And so it can be one of them.
Yeah, then absolutely fine. If it is
fine.
one of them, then perfectly fine. However, if it's the final outcome,
The
then
final thing.
then is a question.
Then it's a problem. Because what happened was when she sent a query to IB, the reply that came from IB was that since it's performance, so the realized artwork there has to be a performance of the script. So I think that's the problem. That's why I said, to be on the safer side, it's always better to create
have a performative,
performative.
So if you look at the strands, and if you look at the details of all of these tasks, we get to understand that they talk about planning performances. So ultimate expectation would be a performance there.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing with this year's unit is that it doesn't align so easily with the theater practitioners. And so the resources they have shared, there is an article called Aesthetic Evolution of Eco Theater. So there it talks about 2 artists which are like theater designers. And so that's where the material is coming from. And so that artist is purely a theater designer. So it's not an easy unit for theater to explore, because there are no particular artists which work only with nature or whose work is entirely inspired from nature.
But again, I don't know, again, if Srivati, you might have to help me out on this, but can't we look at then the impact of those designers on the performance as such?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Just to add to this point, Akshat, Akshat mentions that they're not specific artists working in that line, but it clearly talks about the 4 elements of nature, how aesthetic value through theater performance, how nature can bring that aesthetic value. So we can explore that how the elements of nature, it can be fire, water, earth, and your like that. So you can go through that path also. And it's not like, for example, I was giving this example of Chakravyuh, Ratan Thyam's play. It is entirely all the physical theater and how the elements of Manipur culture, nature, and their livelihood is brought into the performance through that performance style. But it's not, you can directly say it's a nature inspired performance, but there are elements and it's up to us, how do we explore. So what I did with my students is I got production, because luckily I'm from NSD, so I got a lot of video plays from there. So I made them watch Neela Mansingh's play, because she uses all the 4 elements. So it's compulsory. Her play will have all the 4 elements of nature. So how that brings that aesthetic value to the entire performance, and that is conveyed to the audience, that how nature can be portrayed in theater. So that is there. So it's not compulsory that you have to pinpoint that nature and inspiration is there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of looking at it, Vandana. Thanks for that.
Vandana.
Yeah, and we've got a question from Dave, who asks, can comparative study of each other's work be put up in commentary? No, the commentary is for you to focus on your work, your involvement, your inputs into the performance that you've created, not for you to evaluate others, but yourself. So that's what the commentary looks for. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, I think that's about it. If we can go to the next slide, please, because I like the next slide very much, because absolutely, there is no set format prescribed by the IB. Just follow the requirements, have fun, and be creative. I think that's the important part, for you to play and to allow your students to play as well, and just be creative. Because this can easily become something that is so daunting, but you need to allow yourself to play a bit, and then you will get creative. So yeah, I'm going to end on that.
Thank you so much, Srividya, for this lovely, well-informed and deep inquiry into this. We're going to be putting up a link for a feedback. Please do take some time out and give us your feedback on this. Ruchira, will you be putting up the link?
That shall be on the chat box.
Yes.
Great. And
any other questions?
Yeah.
Please do put it up on the chat box or unmute yourselves and talk to us. We'd be more than happy to answer you.
I'm very glad that you found this insightful, Zubin. Thank you so much for your questions. They were very, very important questions that you asked. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Srividya.
Thank you, Akshat. Good to see you again.
Yeah, so long.
Yes, very, very long. And you too, Nala. It's been ages. Great. And if at any point, our Journal Foundation does work with artists in the endeavor to give focus and highlight the process over the product. So if any of you would like to contribute to our Journal Foundation in the way of a webinar or, in any other way, please do get in touch with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Srividya. Yeah, you still need to bring, still need to come to Basavanagudi.
I still do. It's been years.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone. Have a good
Thank you very much. It's very good to see you after a long time.
Hi, Ajay.
Hi. How have you been?
Oh, hello.
I've been good, thanks.
Good to see people connecting here.
Yes, Ms. Ruchira, thanks for being a bridge. Ms. Srividya, very nice. I would say really insightful session.
Thank you, Ajay.
I'd really take a long time to, maybe to actually digest all the information, but beautiful Q&A sessions and, some very nice examples, Srividya. Really looking forward. So let's meet.
Sure.
I'm sure you're in Bangalore. I'm in Bangalore as well. So maybe anytime.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Ruchira, and thank you, Ms. Sami.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
We can still connect
We
somewhere.
have one more like that.
I didn't. Someone was saying something.
I was saying that we
more.
may. I just expect we may also connect again if it is possible at all.
Definitely, of course.
Yeah, thank you so
If
much.
there are any requests like this, we would just request you. The email ID is on the screen. Please write to us and let's connect once again.
Yes.
IB is all about collaboration. And yes, and that's the whole idea of creating this platform of Art Journal Foundation also, so that we all can come together.
So you're saying Art Journal Foundation is your ID at gmail.com, right?
Yes, Art Journal Foundation at gmail.com.
There we can make a request for the presentation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Very nice. Thank you for the session. It was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see a BA date student as well, if you're still around. Hi.
Hi, yes, I am still around. I just wanted to say hi.
Hi, fellow Arts Central alumni.
I know, it's great to meet you. I'm going to drop you an email and we can definitely connect that way.
Sounds good.
Thanks for today, everybody.